Good afternoon. I'm glad to see all of you escape the casino in Monaco. And of course, we're on tomorrow to Livorno and then to sites in Italy. And I'm going to give a rather cursory view of the great cities of Florence and Rome, and also where we're landing, Livorno. I'm sure a lot of you have been in Italy much, or you have ancestry there, and this is a country that has had a very long and very difficult history, but it above all is left with all these treasures of the past, and then a fairly vibrant life these days. So I will give you an overview just to see where we're going, and you can begin to get a little grip on what this great country and civilization is. Now we're just going, first of all, to Tuscany, and we're landing in Livorno, which is down on the lower left-hand side. And you take the road to Florence. Some people will go to Pisa on a excursion, but the main reason for landing here is to go to Florence, which is in English, it's the old version of the old Latin name. You'll see all over in Italy, it's called Firenze. But this is the flag of Tuscany. This is the central province of the west coast of the great peninsula of Italy, and it was its own ducal kingdom on and off for many centuries in the wash of history. And this is the Tuscan flag. I'm not sure what where the horse is flying to, but it'll be right ahead of us on our trip. This is Livorno, where we're landing, which is a fairly large port in a major industrial center and exporting center, which has in itself had a very long history. All of this area, of course, goes back into prehistory, Etruscan time, Roman times, and then various other kingdoms and rises and falls of empires have passed through here. Livorno was a fortified port during Roman times, which then became its own independent city under the Duke of Tuscany. And this is an example of the fortifications along the shore. This is the Castello de Bolalla. And then this was the town itself, which had a triangular kind of a fort from late medieval times, 1500s this was built. But notice the canals that are part of the moats, and then a whole area that has an internal canal system in the old city, which is still there. Now this it was a period when armies ravaged Italy over and over again, so every ancient town has a tremendous fortifications if they haven't been torn down yet, or paved over by new highways. This is the old fort, and then the entrance to the canal system of Livorno. Those of you who are going to Florence, you won't have time to go see this, but if you're just on the ship, you want to just go off into the town, you can walk around, see some of this. I'm showing you things that you might not see just because we only have a day and we only have so much time to see all these different things. But this is what they call Nova Venezia. The Duke of Tuscany in the 1500s proposed that this be just like Venice, that they have an internal canal system and an aquatically based city. But of course, is out closer to the bigger sea. This is the Duke Fernando I. He was a Medici, and he laid out this town and defended it against the French later. But this statue, it was called the Monumento de Quattro Mori, has curiously 4 Moors, or black Africans, that had been captured in battles in North Africa, and to his credit, they were chained to his own monument to this day. Now this has been some controversy because this evokes some problems today. But in Livorno you have a classic late medieval cathedral that was around the town square in the classical style. This cathedral had been bombed to complete destruction in World War II by Allied bombing, and the city has, in the last couple of decades, completely rebuilt it. So this is part of the wages of Italy, is that they've had destruction and then reconstruction. But Livorno was interesting because it was an open free port with no taxation for import or export. So it built up a very big business in the medieval and late Renaissance time. And then it also was a free port for refugees, meaning people came from, first of all, the Jews who were kicked out of Spain and Portugal, then Greeks who came, Northern Europeans, and even Muslims had their own quarter. And so Livorno, let's say, had its prosperity based on being an open city and allowing people to come and live there. This is a medieval era church, the Chiesa San Catrina. It has a curiously 7-sided tower to it. And Livorno is also known as the capital of the Italian Navy with the academy. Naval Academy is there in Livorno, and you'll see in the harbor there are warships and training. And because it's on the Mediterranean, it has a number of museums of Mediterranean history. This is one, the Museo Fattori. This is one, the Villa Henderson, which was an example of English merchants who came down to Livorno. In English, it was known as Leghorn. That was the old name for the city. But there was a lot of trade between Northern Europe and Britain in particular. And one of the main industrialists in the town was the primary builder of naval torpedoes, which is a business that goes on today. Another product of Livorno is Galliano, if you know that sweet liqueur. Now, up the road from Livorno is Pisa, which is another classic city on the Rio Arno that goes up into the Apennines and is also the center river in Florence. Now, this is a modest-sized city in Italy, but again, it was a Roman encampment at the junction of two rivers that then became a fortified town. This is the city wall that dates from 1156, and it's one of the best preserved medieval period walls in all of Italy. Then it had a campanile, watchtower, bell tower. So this Pisa is a city of only about 200,000 people and much better preserved than other Italian cities that have grown and industrialized more. Here's the Piazza Cavalieri, where the horsemen used to parade through. Now again, if you go to Pisa, you may not have time to see this. This is along the River Arno, a medieval Chiesa de Santa Maria. And so the town is sort of has the qualities of Florence, but without the larger population, and particularly without all the museums and the crowd of visitors that we'll see when we get to Florence. This is on the grounds of the great cathedral, which is, again, a Renaissance construction. And it's around a Piazza del Miracoli, the Miracle Plaza, because this is the most famous site why people go there. That little tower to the right of the cathedral. Now, this is all beautiful Carrara marble, which is mined not far in the northern reaches of Tuscany. But like the great cathedral, the Duomo in Florence, this is a masterpiece of Renaissance architecture with its cascading walls and filigree marble and a beautiful dome. And then the tower, it was the bell tower. Now this is an object of great admiration that it hasn't fallen over in over 500 years, and essentially it was built on soft ground, began to settle just as soon as it was built. Now it's at about 16 degrees off center, and for centuries people have been amazed that it hasn't actually fallen over. No, I thought it was leaning the other way. So it becomes the object of some questions on which way it'll go, but they've been in recent years been trying to stabilize it by lifting out soil under the lifting foundation, putting weights down it, holding it on, and then hoping that it'll right itself. But so far it has been stabilized, but they have not gone to this degree because it could damage the very delicate construction that it is. Meanwhile, people go up there and hold it up for fun. I think this is the origin of the selfie comes from the Tower of Pisa, because there's endless pictures of people doing this. Or if you do it the wrong way, it might come out like this. But if you're going to go there, you can take your own picture and imagine what it is. But so far, it's still solidly holding on. Now I'm going to take you to the city of Florence, which is again on the banks of the Arno, and it was once in medieval times a walled city, and it dates back to actually a grant from Julius Caesar in the first century AD, gave this lush river valley to one of his senators and developed it as a rich farmland, then the city. And it built around the old bridge, the Ponte Vecchio, that crosses the Arno River, and has spread out around there as mainly a trading center, military and political center. In literary terms, this is the most famous of all of the Florentine writers, is Dante Alighieri, who, of course, wrote the Inferno and numerous works in Latin, and also he began to use vernacular Florentine, which then became the Renaissance language for literature. At that time, in the 1300s, the Medici family developed a wealth in trading, mainly in textiles and in transshipment. And then Cosimo de' Medici became the founder of the Florentine and then the Tuscan state. And that's the emblem. The fleur-de-lis is originally a Florentine symbol. There's a long and often dangerous history of uprisings and attacks by various others, and so rather than detail them, I just say that everybody had wanted to take Florence as a prize of empire, including the Spanish, the French, the Pope and his armies. But this was the Spanish siege, which ravished the countryside around it, but it did not take over the city walls. The Medicis held on their power and were very Machiavellian. Machiavelli being one of the advisors to the Medici, who wrote the famous book about how a prince should balance power and control the populace and such. The Medicis lived in this palace, the Palazzo Pitti, which is across the Arno from the old town, and that itself is a great museum now with beautiful interiors and furnishings and coats of arms and armor and all of the glories of the Renaissance period. Now, back when warfare was horse-mounted and in armor, that was one thing. As soon as larger cannons came and modern warfare began, this kind of a city became quickly obsolete. And then it was taken by the Austrian Habsburg Empire, and it was joined in to the Austro-Hungarian Empire rather than the southern Italy, which was not part of it at the time. This was Leopold II that became the Duke of Tuscany, but they were from Vienna. So the long history has all kinds of different rulers. And when the formation of the nation of Italy happened, starting with uprisings in 1848, Florence became the capital of Italy under Garibaldi. And there it is today. It's mainly still in its Renaissance architecture. It had never suffered any widespread destructions. And even in World War II, it was considered so valuable as a heritage site that it was not bombed. It was taken without a fight. And so here we have the center of the city itself. You can go down to the main squares, the Piazza Vecchio, and then the Plaza degli Uffizi. That's the Uffizi is the great museum in the center of the city by the river, across the Ponte Vecchio, go down to the Pitti Palace. So there's, in a day that you only get just a taste of it. If you've ever gone, you could spend a week, or I had a classmate once who liked it so much she decided to spend the rest of her life. Now she's married, has children, and has become a Florentine. So many people are, let's say, entranced by the different culture there. This is further north from the Arno. There's the Duomo, or the great cathedral, and many other sites, too many to really even begin to mention. But it all starts with this river, and has numerous bridges across it, and all of them are pedestrian, most of them, and so you can cross over. But that's the Ponte Vecchio, the one that has all the little buildings attached to it. And at one point, the Medici Duke said that that will only be allowed for jewelry. And so to this day, you go along there, most of it is jeweler's shops. So that it is probably the most precious bit of bridge in the world. And it survived now for almost 500 years with its shops. In World War II, when the German army retreated, they blew up one side of it, hoping to stop the Allied advance. And so this is in 1944. That's all since been rebuilt, but they spared the bridge just because of its great historic value. Well, here's the Great Duomo. And this was, again, a Renaissance masterpiece by the architect Filippo Bulicchetti. And this has a campanile, or the bell tower, and the main dome itself is a fantastic construction of stone and then tile work, and it's a freestanding arch, one of the most remarkable engineering works of the Renaissance. And then all of the other exterior walls are three kinds of marble, white, they're all Carrara, and then kind of a blue and then another green marble. And so it's if you see it, this is again a great treasure of architecture, that the whole thing would be built out of that very fine stonework. This is the baptistry near the main hall. This is the campanile, or the bell tower. And so this has to be seen to be believed. But you can see how all the streets come in, crowd around. In typical European cathedral, they're right downtown, and they're right surrounded by the commercial and residential buildings. What they lack, though, is a parking lot. And you'll notice that it sort of gets a little crowded there. But again, the detail inside and outside is quite beautiful. Here's just over the main gate of it, some of the fine sculptures. And so this is Florentine architecture and carving at its best. Here's the Palazzo Vecchio, which is the old palace, which is now was the Medici government center and armory. So this was back when, let's say, the knights and the soldiers kept the town. But it's right next to the Uffizi Gallery, and so in spite of the crowds that are probably there, that's really the heart of the town with all the beautiful Renaissance paintings, sculptures, fine filigree relief. There's endless artwork in Florence. And most of it survived well, some of the flooding of the town, but the Uffizi itself was bombed in 1993 by, they think, some of the mafia because of some bad deal with the Florentine government. But meanwhile, they're caretakers of the churches in particular. I mean, this is, even though Italy is a Catholic nation, many of its treasures are now national heritage with priesthood, but they open them up as museums also. So here's one of the religious paintings. This is in the cathedral. Another one in Uffizi, a beautiful portrait of young Mary, Santa Maria, in her more delicate Florentine fashion. Here's in the Palace of the Medici, which has elaborate mirrorwork, sort of like a early Versailles. And again, lots of beautiful paintings, fantastic protection of them now. And then here's David, yes, who is, the weather's so good he did not need to wear his robe. But this is the original that was put in at what they call Accademia. It used to be outside. There is a copy outside in the square, but that's actually, the original is in to protect it from the elements and any vandals, which occasionally are a problem in Italy. Then the neighborhood had all these different, all the neighborhoods have markets. So if you have seen the museums, one of the great things to do, just wander off anywhere in the neighborhood, and they all have a piazza with a market. Right downtown, there's the called it Nuovo Mercato, which is famous for having this little wild boar statue that everybody rubs his nose for good luck. And then there's lots of shopping, the beautiful leather works, jewelry, fine shops of all kinds of things in Florence. So it is a real pleasure just to wander and see what they're offering these days. If you have time also to go across the river, there's a beautiful garden of Boboli that's across the way, past the Palazzo Pitti, which gives you an overview of the city and a kind of a break from all of the crowds that are often packing in downtown. Unfortunately, we won't be there at night, but that's a little scene of what the river looks like. So another time we can come and stay longer in Firenze, in Florence. But then the next day, of course, we go to Civitavecchia, which is the shipping port for Rome. Now that SPQR, this is the city flag, that is actually from the Roman Empire of the Senate Populo Qua Romana, which is the original Roman Republic symbol. So it endures now over 2,000 years. Rome was legendary in its creation in the 2nd century BC upon the site of an Etruscan village. So there was a whole other civilization before the Roman, but Romulus and Remus were said to have been cast off orphans of the god Mars, who then were cast into the woods, and a she-wolf suckled them till they grew up. And so this is the supposed source of the name of Rome is Romulus, which is it's a name still used in Latin countries, but it's as they grew up, they decided to start a village of their own, and in almost an Cain and Abel kind of a story, Romulus killed his brother Remus over jealousy of a girl, and then went on to make a large town and begin to expand. But again, it was on the basis of a previous culture. It's called Etruscan, of which there's now a lot of the archaeological interest, because every time they dig anywhere in Rome, they go down another layer below the Roman era, and they find tombs and artifacts that are usually terracotta of the Etruscans. And so this is another point of current rewriting of history. Who was the origin of Rome and the culture? It goes back even more than the Latin chronicles. But the city of Rome expanded to then make alliances and then to have a larger kingdom of all of the Italian peninsula and the islands surrounding. Now you see the blue in the lower left-hand side. That's Carthage, which became the great enemy, and there were 2 Punic Wars, and Rome conquered North Africa then and spread its empire all over the Mediterranean. And this was the first great empire of the ancient world that is so well documented because they were very diligent in their annotations of all of the conflicts and all of the tribute and the trade. And Rome became the center of this, with this vast empire either directly run by the Senate or the imperial provinces, which were often run by the legionnaires. The heads of legions would have their own province and pay tribute to Rome, or then the vassal states, which would also pay tribute. But the Roman legions went all the way up to Hadrian's Wall in Britain, and all the way to the Mesopotamia, and all the way in Upper Egypt, etc. So there are ruins of Rome all over the place, and wherever you go, especially we were just in Spain and France, there's always a Roman amphitheater or ruins. And the long history is too much to describe. This is Emperor Vespasian, whose residence is currently being excavated near Florence. And he was a minor emperor in the post-Republic era, but they're finding out more about them because they found his house now that was outside of Rome. There are many, many other ruins of different places, but when they find a bust like this, originally the Greek style of statue and portraiture is particularly striking. You can see the look in his eye. He's just about to say something, as many a senator does if they think enough. Anyway, ancient Rome was founded on 7 hills, and this river valley with these hills became the site of temples, fortifications, and then this is still the core of the city with the Circus Maximus and the Amphitheatrum Flavius, which we know as the Colosseum, and then other areas, the Platanita, the Forum, up on the upper left-hand side. So this ancient city is still fairly well evident, just because these ruins were so, or rather the buildings were so tremendous when they were ruined that was, even if parts of them were used to build more outside the city, the original sites were fairly well kept, particularly that Rome in the empire was the world's largest city with, they estimate, almost 2 million people. Then it went down at its nadir to only 20,000 people after it had been ransacked in the 5th century, and then other things happened, plagues, and it became a town of mostly ruins. And so by Renaissance times, this is 1435, this is from the famous illustrated text of the Duke of Berry in France. Rome had ruins and a city wall, but it was a third-rate city in what was a larger world then, and Florence was much bigger. So it's curious that Rome had a tremendous empire, then it fell back on itself and was almost abandoned at a certain point, except it had the river and settlements. So by the late 1600s, it had grown again. And again, for trade down the river to Civitavecchia, where we will dock, and it became repopulated over the time. So now it's back to about 2 million people in modern Rome, just about as big as it was 2,000 years ago. Well, this is one of the bridges across the river Trevi, the Ponte Angeli, which are sort of classical maidens standing across. And across the river is this great Castel Sant'Angelo, which was built by Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century AD. But it's been right next to the Vatican, and numerous times in the battles over Rome and between different Italian states and the Pope, the Pope would take refuge there because it was really the military redoubt on his side of the river. This is Trastevere, and it's still there now. It's a museum, of course. But right on that area, there's still a little village, which is, or rather neighborhood, that is the oldest remaining part of Rome with a lot of medieval streets and alleyways, and this was a very poor side of town. It's also the part of town that was mandated by Pope Clement III as the Jewish ghetto. And so it was a trading center, but a very poor side of town until now it's, of course, central Rome. It has become a fancier town, area with boutiques and small residences and such. But until medieval times, there were still parts of the city wall. This is the Porta di San Paolo, which with a Egyptian-style pyramid right next to it. It's still there. This is still there. This dates from about the 5th century AD, and it was built to defend Rome against the onslaught of the Visigoths and other groups that were attacking Rome at the time. They finally sacked Rome and then sort of finished it off as a city. And as the long history goes on, there was a schism in the Catholic leadership, so Constantinople was part of the Eastern Christian Church, and then Avignon was where the Pope fled when Rome was attacked. The Vatican was sacked. This is 1527, being attacked by a Florentine army. 1848, the Republic of Italy, a non-secular and a democratic republic, was proclaimed in the Piazza del Popolo in Rome by Garibaldi and his compatriots, and that led to fighting for a number of different decades. Later, 1870, the Italian government attacked Rome to chase the Pope out, and this is back when the papacy, the Vatican, had their own army and much of the land of central Italy. And so these kind of battles are well known to the Italians, but we don't realize how, let's say, confusing the history could be and how the Italian government was founded in opposition especially to the Pope. And it was later in the 1950s there was a complete peace treaty written that makes the Vatican what it is today. Meanwhile, much of Rome was left in ruins like this. This is in the Forum. And so visitors for now a number of centuries go to Rome and find, well, why is this all in such ruins? Well, it's been a long time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's taken more than a few days to tear it apart. Even Mussolini knocked down a lot of the oldest part of Rome to build big boulevards so that the city could be secured. And the last time there was any damage was in the 1944 as the Allies came up and swept the Mussolini and the German army out. And this is a picture taking the work of liberators. But the Vatican was spared by consensus. But some parts of Rome were damaged, not as much as other cities in Italy. So that some of the great sites in Rome, this is the Piazza Navona, which is Renaissance era, and the Vatican, that's the St. Peter's right behind it. This is across the Arno. You can walk from here to the Vatican in about 10 minutes. But this beautiful obelisk in the center is still there. And now it's a beautiful plaza with a fountain, Hampson carriages you can go around. So this is central Rome. You can go see this all of day after tomorrow. And again, the layers of history are always in your face. This is Aurelius, his monument to himself for his conquests in the Middle East, right there near the Piazza Navona. And you have Renaissance churches like this Chiesa San Giovanni, St. John, Chiesa Santa Maria. This is said to be the best medieval church interior left in Rome. And here's the Piazza del Popolo, the public square. And that's an obelisk that was brought from Egypt. And then there's Michelangelo's great Piazza de Campidoglio. And so this is a later Renaissance government center, but a beautiful plaza, as there are many in Rome. Here's the Spanish Steps, which go up to toward the Vatican. Here's another Renaissance era they call the Temple of St. Paul, which is a rotunda completely. And then the Fontana Trevi, which is famous for tossing coins in it. So these are actually Renaissance era. Now we're going to go back a little further in time. This is facing from one of the hills down to the Colosseum. But even so, these are monuments to conquest of an earlier era, but they're still standing there. And that's right across from the great Colosseum and the Arch of Titus, which was built as a Roman legion's monument. So the Colosseum, or the Amphitheater of Flavius, is the most famous site in all of Rome, and it dates from the 1st century AD and was built over many decades and centuries as it grew larger and larger. And then it is, for many years, if you were there in Rome, now 15, 20 years ago, it was a big roundabout for cars, and so you had to cross the traffic to go see it. Now it's all been pedestrianized, but this is one of the most remarkable constructions in Rome and anywhere in the world, because it's all brick with cement work, cement being something that the Romans invented, and the civil engineering of this alone is quite a sight with its multiple walls and arches and passageways. It has been controversial because it's been falling apart for so long. People have for generations said, well, either we should fix it or close it or rebuild it. Of course, many modern stadiums for sporting events are based upon this idea of galleries in a circle to watch a great sporting event, which in this case was gladiators and fighting lions and bloody sport if it is. But you can go in it in certain sections. Recently, they've closed off parts of it because of undermining of the foundations and questions of preservation. But this is the whole view with the subterranean galleries. Now, you can watch the movies of Ben-Hur and the Gladiator to get the real flavor of it, if not the smell of it. And so there's been the thought of repairing a section of it to its original specifications, such as they can imagine. It used to have big shade cloth, like big sails over the top gallery so that on a hot day everybody would have shade. And some places that has been recreated in Europe where there's a smaller stadium, but this one is so big that it's hard to imagine rebuilding it in its original glory. So it's left as it is, somewhat of a crumbling and kind of a hazardous place to visit. But you can go on a certain prescribed area and take a look at it and get a sense of it. It's quite tremendous. But you wouldn't want to be stuck down there with the other gladiators. Well, this is on the side of it, this is a text describing how many times they've tried to fix things and preserve it. Now, it goes back to the 1500s with Pope Pius the Ninth. But nonetheless, dedicated to the Christian martyrs, of course. Well, this is the Titus Gate that is near there, which is, again, a object of the Roman Empire's self-glorification after the conquests. They come back with the tribute and the prisoners and the slaves and such. But this one has been fairly good condition because it's right there at the Colosseum Center, and you can see some of the characters at war, including this is the sacking of Jerusalem and the Second Temple. And here's the leftover of the Roman army at in their glorious garb, looking for a new conquest. And you'll see these from when we were there. Here they are making their advances, and sure enough, they have their conquest. And then right near there is the Roman Forum. Now this is the grand, glorious center of town with the original Senate building, temples. Now it's described that the governance and religion were all mixed together because they had live sacrifices, conferences, stormy Senate debates. All of this happened right here. This was part of the original archive building. Some of it's been restored, but most of it has been knocked down over and over again and then sometimes rebuilt. So this is literally a pile of rubble, much of it, and they continue to dig down to find more evidences of parts of it. But you can see that scaffolding, how some of the great brickworks, which are often then covered with marble, have all just continued to crumble over time. So this is one of the imperial monuments at a time that's just sitting out to exposed. The best of the recent archaeology and things that are delicate are taken to the museums, though, but they leave some of this as one of the temples to the Vestal Virgins, where they sacrificed young women. And then when it was Christianized, that became the tradition of monasteries for women and nuns. But this is the remains of Roman, polytheistic religion and sacrifice that was then consecrated into Christianity. This is Hadrian's largest construction right near the Forum. This became later a tremendous church, but again, it's the facade, the interior structure is gone. You can see the upper right-hand side, some of the marble pediments and columns that have fallen down. They're just the leftover of what the glory used to be. And again, it's under archaeological study and preservation, and so this, they continue to find out more about that center of the Roman Empire as the time goes on. But my favorite in Rome is this square with, curiously, an obelisk on top of an elephant, and the round building there is the Pantheon. This is the oldest standing in good shape building, dedicated in 156 AD by the Emperor Hadrian again, though it has the name of Agrippa, who was an earlier emperor on it, who had built part of it, and they don't actually know when it began. They think it actually dates maybe to 200 BC with an original Roman temple for all the gods. Now, that's why they call it the Pantheon, because it covered Mars and Mercury and all these other of the many, Saturn, of the Roman gods. And so it was a temple that was built as a rotunda with this classical, almost Grecian face, again with that obelisk in front of it. But as you go in these tremendous bronze doors, you come in to the great rotunda, which was built again with brickwork and concrete, and then faced with marble, and then later consecrated as a church by the Pope and given to the Pope as a church, and that actually protected it from being torn down as idolatry or something. So it's faced with different shrines and temples, and then the most famous part of it is the great, what they call oculus, which is 146 feet, sort of 38 meters high, and then with this beautiful frieze work and receding sections. Now this is the model for instance, the U.S. Capitol and other buildings around the world. But that's open air, so when it rains, it gets wet a bit, but it gives this tremendous feeling to this building. It also is an echo chamber. If it's empty of people, you can hear a whisper around the room. And so this is what you call spiritual architecture at its most ancient that is still here. Later, again, it was used to this day as a Catholic church, but it's most famous in modern times for being the resting place of the emperors of modern Italy, Emmanuel, Umberto. These are the imperial line, the last one until the modern republic. And so they're interred there. Now, the other point about in Rome, though, is the Vatican. And as I was mentioning, the church, having been established with the Roman Empire, Emperor Constantine converted after persecuting Christians, but then Rome became the center of the worship along with Constantinople. But the Papal States, the administration of the church, became its own kingdom and its own military power, and then fought with the other, particularly the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, and Sicily. You see, Sicily had its own empire. Everything was its own empire back then or kingdom until empires came and took it over. And it's a long and painful history in many ways, but the Pope, being the temporal leader of the church, had, like many another king, wheelings and dealings in power. This is Constantine with Pope Sylvester giving tribute from Constantinople. And later, different other popes worked with secular powers. Here's Pope Leo crowning Charlemagne as the Holy Roman Emperor. So he would be the secular leader of the great Christian territories until it tended to break up, and then there were competitive popes and competitive Holy Roman Emperors. And then they fought over everything in the most human kind of ways. Meanwhile, the Vatican became the fortress center for the Pope until now. So there's a long line of history here. But the Vatican remains as one of the world's smallest independent states, recognized as such with ambassadors to all the other countries and to the United Nations. But it's all in this small territory of only about 40 hectares. And so you have great St. Peter's Square, and then the Basilica, the world's largest church, and then the grounds and many other buildings. In 1450, it looked like this, more of a Florentine look until the later buildings were built and the plazas were built. Here's the Vatican overview with the papal flag and the symbol of the Vatican. And you see it has its own hilltop, and that's where the center of the church is. Now you can walk from the Piazza Navona right across the bridge, the Trevi, and then you can come to the great Piazza San Pietro, and again, a Egyptian obelisk brought back from Egypt by Caligula, the great ferocious emperor. And then there's the Basilica of St. Peter's. Now this is the British Army marching in the square right after World War II. So that the Vatican was neutral, sort of, and it was protected mostly. And so it did not have any damage, and all of this late Renaissance construction, much of it designed by Michelangelo, is still there, and a great testament to the endurance of history. And if you have a chance to go in there, it's a tremendous big church with those great spiral columns. But it is a governed administrative place. Here's the administrative offices, Piazza di Governatore, guarded by the Swiss Guard. So these are the remnants of a medieval army that are still there with their own problems, if you read about it. But the great thing about the Vatican is their archives and their museum, beyond the spiritual leadership, they have one of the world's largest libraries of ancient and medieval texts and artwork. Most famously, the Sistine Library with its great ceiling done by Michelangelo. Now this is the after picture, because this was about 20 years ago. They went up and they cleaned the original painting and touched it up. So now it's very bright. It was because of all the candles and such for centuries. It became very dusty. But now it's fresh as the day it was painted almost. And so you can go in there and get a little dizzy looking up at it. Of course, this is the most famous scene, the creation of man. And the other great masterpiece of this is, of course, the Pietà of Michelangelo. So this is the great treasures of the Vatican. Here's the Apostolic Palace, where the current resident there in his quarters up there is saying hello. And of course, this is Pope Francis, who is in the news all the time now, and the great successor to all this history and tradition. This is his Annunziato, and he was chosen. And now he's going around the world, but he lives in the Vatican, and you can follow him in his ways around the world. And then he has other properties. This is the Cassetto. Now, this Pope Benedict's living out here. This is their little summer shack up on the hills to the east of Rome. So the empire goes on, I say, and outside of Rome there are plenty of beautiful palaces and things like that. But this is New Rome. I'm going to just switch to the current times other than Pope Francis. The city has grown tremendously and spread out. Civitavecchia is down right there off the coast, or at the mouth of the Trevi River. As I said, it's gone up to a population of almost 2 million people again. In the 1920s, and with the establishment of the modern republic, and then the Emperor Emmanuel and his leader Mussolini, they built quite a bit of modern triumphant architecture, particularly when Italy had a bit of an empire. So these are from the 1920s. And then there's a whole area that's modernist administrative offices that were again built by Mussolini in that era. This is part of it. This is the university, so there's a whole area to the south of the ancient city that is a modern city, and then there's a whole other area to the northwest of the city that's Nova Roma, they call it, where they have office buildings. And now this is all connected by trains and undergrounds and things like this. And so there's a modern city, so the old center is not necessarily disrupted by new construction. This happens to be the largest mosque in all of Europe, as an example of the tolerance of Italy and a large Muslim population now. But I mentioned how this whole population of the city has gone up and then down and then back again. So now it's probably as big a city as it's ever been. And now you have many immigrants come from other parts of Italy or around the world to live there and work there. Well, here's just your pasta carbonara and fresh vegetables coming into all the restaurants. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about contemporary Rome, because it is an international city with a number of major United Nations offices there, international business. Of course, then it's now the national capital again. So Rome is in a new era of being of international importance, and lots of visitors from all around the world. But it's an expensive city to live in. So let's say like Paris, you don't want to just go there and unless you can afford it or you have some work. So the young Romans are, let's say, they're a proud group, and they have, of course, their football team and Their modern culture is there on top of yet another layer on top of the great history of Rome, and scandal sheets, and who knows what's really going on. But oh, this one's complaining, oh, we don't want to have to pay for TV, you can get it for free. So it's a very lively place, and I can't quite read this young woman's mind. I'm kind of snatch pictures of people just to see what they might be thinking. Of course, she's wondering what she's going to wear for dinner at the fancy restaurant. Then this was on the wall. So, attenzione, conscienza di tutti. I know, warning. I know about it all, and I think it's a personal diatribe. I don't know. Anybody read the Italian detail? We'll find out. But it's a lively city nowadays. But nonetheless, they keep digging and finding more things. This is Monte Lupo, where the home of the emperor, the summer home of the emperor that I showed earlier, has been recently excavated. So every month or year, they keep bringing more stuff out of the ground, deeper and deeper, including some beautiful bronze work. And in the construction of the metro subway for Rome, they found a water aqueduct, the largest they'd ever found yet. But a lot is being found in the water with archaeology of underseas nearby. And so there's a considerable trade in illegal goods. And here's the Carabinieri, the police that are guarding what has recently been found in a ship or underground. And so this is a very controversial issue in Italy. So I'm going to leave you just with a bit here. Ancient Rome was as confident of the immutability of its world and the continual expansion and improvement of the human lot as we are today. Well, the parallels go on, and some people don't know quite what to think with the confusions that we have these days. Now, this was a performer on the street. Curiously, if you see him, he's not there. And I was reading the newspaper, the current mayor of Rome, his name is Ignazio Marino. He's brought from Genoa to make order out of what is a chaotic city. And particularly, he's a newcomer, and he doesn't know all the intrigue and the power players and what's really going on. So he said to be particularly ineffective as a mayor, and they call him Forrest Gump in charge of Rome. And he has a lot of problems. Now I'm going to be short here. The weight of history and the preservation of this great imperial past with the demands of education and care of a society, a stagnant economy and how people make ends meet even if they don't really report their income, the problems of the government being the justice system and the regulations, environmental or traffic, are often not well done. The taxation is sort of like Greece. It's sort of just a suggestion. Then the unity of Italy, which the Lega Norte, which is Berlusconi's party, he was La Fuerza, but the northern provinces don't want to take care of the southern poor areas, including Sicily, which doesn't even consider itself really part of Italy. Then we have the corruption and organized crime, which is a real problem still. And then family and women's issues. Now, Italy has the lowest birth rate in all of Europe, 1.1 per woman, which means the population is declining, sort of like Japan. And then immigration. The demographics of the Middle East and Africa are adding a few 100 million people in our generation, whereas Italy is declining and needs people to work. And so what will that make as a future Italian society? And then if Italy can't be very well united, how can Italy be a good partner with the rest of Europe? But you can read in the papers about all these issues. Well, anyway, so Garibaldi, who set up the Italian Republic, is still the father of the country, but it's a very disunified, in many ways, dysfunctional country. And of course, when they get a premier like Berlusconi and his scandals, Mr. Bunga Bunga, then it rises up, and here's a women's protest on the steps complaining about him. Now they have Maria Motti, who's the current mild-mannered premier, but just the justice system's a problem. This is the Amanda Knox trial, which was a fiasco. And I've done business in Italy, which is just a fiasco. And then they have the mafia, or the Camorra. They got different groups. He's smiling now that he got caught. And a lot of what they're doing now is human trafficking. They're smuggling all these peddlers in. They have riots in the parliament over different things. And then they have a wave of people coming. So this is you read about in the paper, hundreds, if not thousands, dying off the African coast, trying to get to Italy, which is an easy jump. But then again, it's hard for the Italians to say no, because they were often a great immigrant or emigrant population themselves. So just the other day I saw these images in Marseille of rescue at sea and the troubles of the Mediterranean, which are now memorialized in this for all the people that are dying trying to get to Italy. And the last point was, this is a curious island that came up off of Sicily as a volcanic island, and the British claimed it. Then the king of Sicily drove them off and claimed it. Then the volcano collapsed and became invisible until a U.S. fleet went by and they bombed it thinking it was a Russian submarine. So that's sort of a metaphor for how Italy rises and falls, but it'll be back. And are you not entertained? Anyway, thank you very much. This guy is. And if he can put up with Italy, he can live anywhere. Thank you very much, and buon viaggio.